rivalry between great powers and what that will do to peace or prosperity or freedom in the world. We're launching a report which you will see is available on isii.global. It compares countries and companies, and it looks into the future of technology. And it identifies 19 core technologies that are shaping that future. Within that, it identifies 6, including AI, that we think will be the subject of the most fierce competition in history to see if they can control this technology and how it is diffused and distributed across the planet. These 6 technologies have been benchmarked in detail in our report, and the findings are quite stark. What I'll do is step back from that and say to you, the report can be read in 2 ways. You could read the report as somebody technical who's saying, which technologies do we need to invest in? And where do we stand as a country? And where do our companies stand against other companies? But there is a very different way to read this report. This report also says that the great transition from the industrial age to the information age is not about to happen, it's already happened. We're in the middle of that transition now, which is why it is so disruptive to be in the middle of this transition. It also says that at this stage, if you took a snapshot, you can tell who is going to win and who is going to lose. It tells you, though, that the future is not predetermined, but it is clear that some countries are very far ahead of others. I will be unkind and just say, amongst those countries leading, the US and China are leading. The EU is an important third player, but there is nobody else even close. So this conference is probably telling you the most important thing to know about AI is diffusion, that it should be diffused to everybody. And what this report tells you is that is not at all the most important thing about AI. That diffusion is something that can be used to make sure everybody in this room and everybody outside has AI. But the purpose of AI is not systems or technology. The purpose of AI is power, enormous wealth beyond any imagination, and the ability to control people. It is quite a stark contrast from thinking this is a technological shift. This is not a technological shift. This is a civilizational shift. We as a species are changing from thinking we should turn up to factories to work to turning up somewhere else, anywhere you want, with a phone. And in that phone is your AI, is your social media, is everything you do. And this AI in your phone and on the end of every social media is clever enough to get to understand you. It is so smart that it understands you as a human being. It starts to understand your preferences, and what is more perhaps smart about this technology is it starts to change your preferences, and you end up being something other than you were before you started using it. This is why it's so clever. So the analogy I would like to give you is there would have been a point in time during the Industrial Revolution when the Europeans had cracked industrial manufacturing, and they'd cracked the energy sources required to scale that. And what they would have done is they would have said, where are the countries around the world where we should take this? And they would have arrived on the shores of many countries, including India. And they would have come as traders, just to trade. And that trade would have been a trade that the Indians in those days, and in Africa, and in Australia, and everywhere else, would have thought they wanted. And they would have taken that trade. And in the process of that trade, they would have become dependent on the Europeans. And the Europeans would have ended up conquering them because of this technology that they had, which were guns and ships and the ability to build factories. This is no different. In fact, this is much more powerful. With this new technology, with AI and social media, I don't need to send an army to your country. I don't need to administer your country. I can sit at home in Shenzhen or Silicon Valley somewhere, or in Germany or anywhere else where I can develop this technology. I will give it to you, and you will think it's free. And you will absolutely fall in love with it and become addicted. And in that addiction, as you use it, the technology will get to know you. I'm going to explain a small piece from a neuroscience perspective in terms of what happens. So part of your brain is a learning part. It's the learning system of the brain. That starts to learn how to use this technology. But at the same time, the technology is learning you. So it has gone inside your brain, and it changes your neurology. It changes the chemicals and the biology and the structure of the brain. And two things are happening at once. One, it is reducing your ability to think and reflect on what you are seeing, because it requires you to react instantly. That instant reaction is an addiction. So when we measure it with neuroscience, we find it's an addiction. The people who have it look just like addicts of drugs and alcohol and so on. You can't stop using it. That's very important, because once you start using it, they send you more and more information, so you use it more. On average in the world, people use it 7 hours a day. So we're using this technology already that much. So here's what happens next. The structure of your brain changes, so it stops thinking too much, and another part of your brain starts to react and consume. As that happens, and it sends you more and more information, your behaviors change, your beliefs change. In fact, your identity changes. You build allegiances to things you didn't have, you buy things you don't need, and you start to hate people who don't believe the same things as you. So this is the power of this technology. So what happens sitting somewhere in Silicon Valley or Shenzhen is I've owned your brain, your mind. You don't know it. This is the most powerful thing. You don't know I've owned it. You think you have free choice, but you don't have free choice anymore. But you think you do. That's why it's so powerful. Why did countries rise and throw over colonial regimes? Because they knew they were being controlled. And someday they wake up and they say, we fight back. But this, you don't do that, because you believe you're in charge. You believe you're a free agent, you have free speech, and you control your own future. But you don't. This is how clever the psychology and the neuroscience of this technology is. The numbers in our report are very clear. There are 5 metrics to decide who is ahead and who is behind. These are very clear. America is ahead on all 5. China is there on 3 of them, but very close on the next 2. The Europeans have 2.5 and are catching up slowly, but a bit slowly. The Americans are superb at certain things. Are commercializing, foundational research, building an ecosystem, marketing it around the world. They're very good at these things, and so we all end up wanting it. Me too. I'm in the same position as you. So we all want it, and we think it's progress. And there is progress then. The progress is big. I would say this. Where is India in this? Nowhere. We do not have the quality, depth, and breadth of foundational research to play in this game. So what are we? We're just a huge market. This country is a huge market that needs this technology, but it does not have the foundational research to allow it to be a leader. So we will have to borrow that from the rest of the world. So in this platform, everywhere in these stages, they will tell you that without this technology, you're in trouble. Well, you are, because you'll fall behind. So you have to have it. So when you look on here and your WhatsApp feed comes, who owns that WhatsApp feed? It is not you. It is somebody else somewhere else. So there is a scenario that we describe in the report, which goes like this. If I'm America and China and I have this technology, what is my purpose? To distribute it, diffuse it all over the planet, and have everybody buying it. No armies, remember? No administration, just sitting there marketing it, and you become a trillionaire. Right? So that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is that if the EU and the UK, so Europe and India combine, that's 2 billion people, and across the 5 metrics, they have enough to create a third way. So there is a third axis that can be built, but it requires Europeans and Indians to be able to work together, because on the one hand, you do have foundational research. On the other hand, this country has the depth of STEM talent, has global distribution through IT services and other things. And actually, they know and they crave independence, right? So you combine these two, you have the biggest pool of the third axis of AI in the world. But it requires you to work together and do that. For that, I would say the following. Do we need 1,000 of us? or 100,000 people to decide that? No. You need a dozen people in a room to get together and figure out how you create that third axis. And to kick off that dialogue, I have the most wonderful panel. So I'm going to describe them to you, then join them and start asking the questions. So first here we have Glenn Gaffney. Glenn Gaffney knows this subject enormously well. If you watch, how many of you watch James Bond films? Every single individual, I hope, has seen one at least, right? You know, there's a gentleman called Q in those films. He's the American Q. So he was at the CIA for 30 years. He headed science and technology at the CIA. His job was every kind of technology on the planet, to find the best there is on the planet and figure out how to use it for America. So that's the job that he did. He left, and for 8 to 10 years, Glenn also handled how do you find these technologies in the planet? How do you incubate them, get them funded and scaled? While he was at the CIA, he also handled data and intelligence. So here's a man who really understands this subject well. Here we have Gary Jacobs. Gary has lived in India for over 50 years. He arrived because he believes India has the answers to the deepest questions of humanity. He fell in love and he stayed. He heads something called the World Academy of Art and Science. They're a partner organization of mine, and we're a partner of theirs. Gary heads the whole organization, which was established by Einstein, Oppenheimer, and Bertrand Russell, because after all the things they did, creating the nuclear weapons, and the war that happened afterwards, they wanted someone who would hold the peace. And so this man's job is peace and prosperity and freedom for the rest of us, right? And himself. And third, we have my very close friend, Shaurya Doval. Shaurya is a former banker and investor in the India Foundation, is the co-founder of the India Foundation, is an economist too, and is a man who has a deep interest, civilizationally, of India and what it means for India going forward. So we have a great and very interesting panel to discuss this topic. So I'm going to kick off and start asking the questions, and hopefully we'll keep you all stuck here and tell you some things about what we see. Thank you. Glenn, I'm going to kick off on the topic of sovereignty. Is it possible to have sovereignty for a nation when they do not control the most important points of control, choke points in the world, whether it's semiconductors or it's software and applications or it's the machinery that underlies it? Is it possible?
So the short answer, I think, is no. I think the short answer here is, where does sovereignty lie? It lies with whoever owns the infrastructure through which your attention, your action, your decision-making, your follow-on execution flow. We have created such complex infrastructures. And the technology now, as Ketan was just saying, we're going through this massive shift. And if we're not paying close attention, if we're not purposeful in how we navigate through this transition, we could be in real trouble. I'm not throwing in the towel. I wouldn't be here if I was throwing in the towel. But I am here, right, to ring a bell that says we have to be paying attention to this and working cooperatively with industry, government, and academia to solve these problems. The tech is not just a tool anymore, right? I grew up, I'm a technologist by trade and training, right? And so many of my technologist colleagues say, it's just a tool, but it's far more than a tool, right? And it's neither good nor evil. But the reality is that the way the markets have developed over the last 20 years, the way we have fallen into bad habits of consumerism, the way we have begun to worship at the altar of ridiculously high finance, worship at the altar of efficiency, we've created an appetite for these things that puts a set of conditions that challenges our very understanding and is beginning to affect, as Ketan said, the cognitive abilities that we have. Just think about how much shorter our attention spans have gotten in the last 10 years. And so we live with this set of conditions that challenge our understanding of sovereignty. And I don't think we have had the discussions about sovereignty that at this level since the days of the Westphalian, peace accord, all right, in 1400, all right. We're at issues of national sovereignty, individual sovereignty, the sovereignty of the people. And what's interesting is that there are very few who actually own that infrastructure, who own the stack. And that stack is a primary basis of influence. Because if you own the stack and you control the data, you control the message, you control the model. As we develop the age of agentic AI and all of the positives that come with it, if we realize that those agents, and you're going to have multiple agents. You're going to have an agent for work. You might have an agent for school. You'll have an agent for entertainment. You'll have an agent for any one of a number of different things. They'll be your agents, and they'll be tuned, as Ketan said, uniquely to you. But who owns your digital persona? And what's the business model that's actually supporting you having that agent? And if it's intended to influence you in a certain way, then where's your sovereignty? And so at the heart of this, we start talking about individual agency, and we start talking about agency in society. And now we're having a different conversation. And so many of our government leaders are pulling the very familiar levers. And so we're either over-regulating or under-regulating, as we just heard in the last panel. And that's not good enough anymore. Because the economics of the last industrial revolution are not the economics of the next industrial revolution, or the sin-industrial revolution, as I'm increasingly calling it, because it's all synthetic. And so now is the time for us to come together and actually wrestle with these questions and think about what it means to partner with these large companies that actually operate more like countries today than they do companies. And it's the basis of those partnerships in goodwill. It's the basis of those partnerships that wrestles with these questions that adjusts both the economic model or the business model and what we mean and what we can preserve relative to sovereignty going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. I'm going to come back to this. I'm just going to ask each of you to answer a first question, just to warm up. So, Gary, I've got a question for you that I think really does focus on your expertise. At what point does optimization of behavior cross the line into loss of autonomy and effectiveness and creativity and human development?
That's a really central question for us. Is AI the biggest, best thing that's ever happened to us? Or is it the thing that poses the greatest threats to humanity? Why is it that we live in a time of unprecedented technological and economic development, and yet instead of everybody walking around with a smile on their face and saying the future is golden, to wondering what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen with our government? Ketan said that America is number one, but I don't know if he said what number one and what. Right now, I think we're number one in turbulence and confusion. And I don't think a lot of Americans feel very number one right now, because with all this technology, with all the economic growth and everything, who's the winner in this? And what's the reason for this ripples of turbulence spreading around the whole world? And AI is not our problem. Technology has never been our problem. Technology is the thing from the time we invented agriculture 10,000 years ago, or writing, or language, or money, or any of these things. The question is, how do we use it? And is money the thing that empowers us And certainly it has empowered tremendous progress of humanity over thousands of years. We can exchange with each other. We don't have to just have barter. We can be trading skills, trading capacities, trading endowments and everything. Or we can be dominated by the money. We can be ruled by the money instead of, because that's all we want, rather than the human opportunities that we have as people. So the question, I don't think, is even about, just to be a little contentious, even about the companies. It's a question of how do we respond? Do we understand that the technology that's being used now by the companies, as Glenn said, is largely taking advantage of our capacity to submit our freedom to whatever we hear or whatever we get when we're on social media or of any description, because we're under the mistaken impression that when I ask a question, it's going to give me something that's valid. And most of us don't realize that when I ask a question, it's going to tell me the thing that makes me come back and ask another question. It's going to tell me what it thinks I want to hear, or rather what I'm really interested in, and I can't resist asking another question. And if it's on YouTube, when they say we're going to give you an answer to the solution of eternal life or living 100 years, then what's that answer? Well, you got to wait for about 45 minutes to find out that it's don't eat walnuts or something like that. Why didn't they tell me in the first minute that it wasn't eating walnuts? Simple, because they're earning money for every minute that I'm on the line. They keep me stretched out as long as I can. If I don't know that, if I think the headlines, whether it's in the newspaper, in the social media, or on YouTube, or whatever it is, mainly desired is, I didn't even know that the YouTube was earning advertising revenue from every minute I'm there on the thing, and their goal is to keep me as long as possible, not to tell me what I want to know. So that's our responsibility. We need to know where we're vulnerable. To our attention is very valuable. The human attention is the most valuable thing in the world. And social media enables the environment to harness our attention to such an extent that whether it's our kids or at any other age, we can't resist the temptation to go back to it. We're being manipulated. We're being told what we want to tell. If I'm in a political party and if I'm in an extreme position, I want to hear all the news that reinforces my side, and I want to hear all the news that slanders and proves that the other side, and that's the polarization we're having in the society today. How do we solve that? As long as I want to be told what I want to believe, rather than what's the truth. And that's our educational system. Has it really taught us to understand the world we live in and the power of attention now, and how we have to use our attention responsibly and not ask, tell me what I want to believe in, tell me more about that I'm right and the other people are wrong, tell me what's true. And we come out of this polarization, we come out of this being a victim, when what we really want to know is the fact and the truth, including if my enemy or the guy on the other side is got a right position, and really I should understand him, not just be justified that I'm right and somebody else is wrong. So our educational system has to really prepare us not to be caught in this division. It's not the AI, but AI gives the empowerment for us to be caught in it. And right now it's new. Like most technologies, we're not sure. We don't know whether the AI, for a lot of people, they're hoping this is going to be a better job for them because they're just entering and they've studied AI. And for decades of people who have been in the workforce are wondering when the AI is going to replace them and take them away. And they lose their autonomy, they lose their freedom because they don't have the skills that the AI has. But I'd just like to put one more point. Whether AI is the golden solution for us or not depends on how we use it. if we're trying to hang on to the work that we're doing now and the world as we're doing it now, whether we're a teacher or a doctor or anybody else, AI is going to start taking away from us the things that we've done. Like, we don't use the slide rule anymore when we got a calculator, and we don't even need the calculator when we've got a mobile phone. And technology replaces so many things, but so we can develop higher order skills and capacities. And the question is, how do we do that? And our education can't stop just with the number of years in college. We've got to keep learning through our life. So I think the real answer is for us, and how to prepare our society and ourselves to live in this high-tech world and take it for maximum advantage rather than be taken advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. There were a lot of points in that. We're going to unpack those in a moment, but I want to come to Sharia. Sharia, how can India avoid being locked into control points that other people have set? So the pathway that other people have set, and how can it avoid losing its autonomy, its agency and sovereignty in the process? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Ketan, for that question. It's a very relevant question because, considering that India represents about nearly 20% of humanity and is the fourth largest, going to be the third largest economy, India is a very big market. And therefore, both the powers that be, maybe China or the United States, would like to tap this market, would like to take away the agency of this market, would like to exploit this market. That's what all colonization is about. It's about being able to acquire new markets and substantial markets and drive the resources of that market from the periphery to the center. So India must first recognize that India actually does, because of its size, its scale, and its opportunity, possess a target for the loss of its strategic autonomy. And then it must take measures to ensure that, as you said, that it does not fall prey to, that its choke points, its control points are being taken over by other powers. And as Glenn rightly pointed out, what are the elements of how your sovereignty is taken away? So the first thing is that India must own its own infra. The infra must reside in India with the Indians. That's the first point. If we control our infra, then we don't allow our information and our data to keep moving to where if infra doesn't exist. The second thing is we need to own our own R&D. We need to be researching and developing technologies and solutions that are relevant for us, rather than other markets telling us what is important for us and us best becoming consumers. To fund this infra and fund this R&D, we then need our own domestic capital. We need our own domestic savings. We need capital sovereignty, because as long as we don't have capital sovereignty, we will be, subject to us being to foreign powers who will deploy their capital for their agendas and for their interests. We also need to control the data, because in this business, data is the new oil, so we need to control our own data. We need to ensure that access to our data is with us, and we are able to work on that data for building our own models and our own solutions. And then finally, I think we need the right policies. The government needs the right policies at every point in time, and it's an evolving scenario where it is collaborative. We want to work with all the countries in this world in developing. I think AI is a great enabler for humanity, but at the same time, we need policies that protect India's interests and that ensure that India doesn't end up being just a market for the rest of the world, for these powers. And I think this is going to be India's biggest challenge, because it requires a big laundry list of things that it must acquire and do real time, because this is being done and fought as we speak today. And I think this whole AI summit that is being held in this capital is really bringing awareness to India and to Indians about the opportunity and the risk that this emerging scenario possesses for all nations, but definitely for great powers and nations like India, and particularly as India aspires to be one of the global players in the next 25 years.
I'm going to ask Glenn just to jump in. Glenn, why don't you jump in, because I think that's linked.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. I want to add to what Sherry was just saying, because not only is India not just a market, India should not be a subcontractor, right, to the other leaders, right, in the world in this space. We need India to not be a subcontractor in this space. AI is a general purpose technology, and those come along maybe once in a lifetime for most of us. It's like electricity, right? A general purpose technology is something that changes every other market that it touches. It's fundamentally different than other tech. Now, every national strategy that's out there today talks about adoption as a key metric for AI, and that's a good thing. But adoption and diffusion are two different things. Because when you have a general purpose technology, history shows that it's the quality of the education system that actually moves that general purpose technology into all of those other markets most effectively. It's not who gets there first. Right? And right now, every market, every competition, and every policy that I see nation by nation is going against leading sector theory, which is you get there first, you monopolize it, you drive the market, and you make a lot of money off of it. But history shows that it's not who gets there first that wins. It's who diffuses into that space. And this is a challenge for democracies, because democracies are inefficient by design. We want them that way. And so in this battle, in this race, we're going to have autocracies or techocracies that try to drive in a specific area and may gain for a time. But our ability to actually think through some of the points that Shuri was talking about and actually focus on this diffusion and begin to change some of those models, right? Because some of these big, I don't want to paint the big tech companies as evil or wrong here, right? Like I said, it's not a matter of good or evil, it's a matter of this is just where we are. But they will work with folks who actually have reasonable conversations and concerns about sovereignty and what sovereignty means moving forward. What does agency look like going forward? And creating new market economics in this space opens up new opportunity.
I'm going to add to that before I ask the next question of my colleagues, which is this next phase of diffusion and colonization of the mind is different, because you begin by colonizing your own people, because you give them the technology and they use it. So it's very different. Before, you thought what you had to do is go to another country to colonize them because they were different. They were foreigners. But not with this technology. You give it to your own people, they become addicted. They make you rich. That gives you the money to go and do it elsewhere. And so everybody gets colonized. So this is very different. And so we've got to understand what it is to actually figure out what to do with it. But as we know, each technology can cut both ways, and it can lead to massive improvements in life. Right? So that not every technology becomes a weapon. Right? So there's another side to this technology. So this same technology can actually unlock human minds, can improve our education, change our experiences, enlighten us so that we become much more enriched human beings. And I want Gary to comment on that. Gary, this technology cuts both ways. What is the other side of this technology?
A lot of people in the world are frightened now about what AI is going to take away from them and make us superfluous, of different ages for different reasons. For the doctor who used to be reading all of the test results and everything, and the x-rays and everything else, now there's a machine that can do it, and the radiologist loses his job or doesn't have to do it and everything. There's always that. But if you look at the history of technology, it's always been that way. Each time something new came, those who were comfortable or organized at the previous level, when Plato said more than 2,000 years ago that this writing is really not good because then people will stop memorizing. And for him, memorization was learning, and that's what it's all about. And that's happened when the printing press came, then the professor is not just somebody who knows what nobody else knows and he can tell you, because anybody can read it for themselves, whether it's religious text or anything else. The question is, what do we do with this greater power we have? What human beings do gradually is we give up doing a lot of the things we used to do, like working in the field and plowing the fields ourselves, or pulling the bullocks ourselves, and so we can do something else. We can do something higher than that. There was a story of a Harvard MBA who decided after graduation that he wanted to start a business, and he bought 500 acres of land in a part of the country which was not where land was cheap, and he was managing 500 acres with himself and one man because he could do so much of it with the technology. He was the entrepreneur. He had time to think and market and create new crops and other things. He had time to read because the machinery could do so much of it. So the question is, what do we do with the capacity that AI gives us? One of the problems we have today is the growth of information is so great that nobody in any field can keep up with the pace of new information. So what do? You become more and more a specialist. And a specialist knows more than anybody else does about this particular field. But the problem is, knowledge today in the world, we have to know about everything. We have to know how it's interconnected. The specialist who's trying to keep up with his unique field can never keep up, can never keep track of what's going on, because all things are developing now, so much information. AI can liberate us from the limitations of specialization, because AI can think out of the box. It thinks out of the disciplinary silo, which none of us can do and consider all the possibilities about it. Then what do? If we don't have to be studying and memorizing just specialized information, what do? We get more time to think. We get more time to think creatively. We make more time to ask questions that are just beyond the information of a narrow field. How is this connected with that? And this is connected with that. I think this is a natural and very healthy opportunity for us to develop higher order. And our education won't be, again, learning how to use a calculator or even learning how to code. That's not a bad thing. Because if we don't have to worry about learning how to code, we can be creating new tools. We can be figuring out applications for new tools, like AI, for example, like that. This is how we've evolved up until now, from the time it was all physical. Now it's mental. Now we can spend more of our term learning how for human skills, for interactive skills, for communication skills, for understanding ourselves and other people, and not just memorizing what's going on in the educational system. I think it is a positive, great opportunity if we rise to the occasion, but we need help. We need not education just for a few years, we need education to take us through our life, so we can be continuously learning as we go forward and thinking too.
Thank you. See, we do have positive views. It's not all about being colonized. I'm gonna ask a question which both Shaurya and Glenn, if you would weigh in on, which is AI is just the beginning of the 6 technologies that we identify which determine the future. And so being behind in AI is awful because it is the general purpose technology, as Glenn said. But the next one is maybe quantum. And then there's fusion. And then there's gene editing. And the 6th one is extended reality. Each of these are at different stages of fruition. But imagine a world where the AI is so clever it helps us make the breakthroughs in quantum and helps us make the breakthroughs in fusion. And then it helps us make breakthroughs in gene editing which aren't just about human extension, life extension, but are actually about creating new species. And it changes our view of reality because of extended reality, VR and AR, and other forms of immersive reality. Now, there's a point at which these technologies are so advanced, if you're a country that is behind on any of them, you're too far behind. Now, this comes back to, and maybe Glenn, you take it first. In this fight for all six, the foundational research has been done by Americans and Chinese. Chinese have invested for 15 years. They know, patiently, strategically, the Chinese know, that winning the first battle, the first mover, as you said, is meaningless, is not good enough. They're a very smart second mover. So how should a country like India, for example, be thinking about this portfolio of six that will be the base of transforming everything?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and
I don't ask easy questions. Right? To see what he says.
Yeah, we could spend the rest of the day talking about this, but to make it brief, I think one of the things that's key, and Ketan said it about how AI can really help and enable some of these other areas, but if we think about quantum, it's not just quantum compute that's really the exciting thing here, it's all the other quantum-inspired things that come from the pursuit of quantum. We understand things about physics today that we didn't understand a few years ago because we've got brilliant engineers and brilliant physicists working together, and there's things that we thought were noise that we're learning now are different physical properties that we didn't know because we didn't see it at that level before. And so just like AI can be empowering and pulling signal out of noise in a medical file, in an image, it's helping us in these other areas as well. China has done a great job in letting the US and others, right, lead in some of the leading edge research, and they just operationalize that breakthrough faster than anybody else. Another way to say it is they've become masters at applying research into the areas that matter. And I think this applied research space is really the critical space for diffusion that I just talked about, and for the development of these next generation economies. And we have to do it in a way that we actually are educating our public, the people who actually are affected by the decisions that are going to be made from these machines. Virtual reality, extended reality, right? An incredible tool for education. We're already seeing that students who actually go through a virtual reality experience and understand the context for the complex learning that they have to do so much better in school with the mundane classes that everyone hates. You still have to pass biochemistry, but you don't mind it as much when you understand contextually that you're solving for saving an ecosystem that matters. And when you have that experience, it makes it part of who you are and the way that you then approach those issues going forward. And I think this is important because I really think experiential learning is the future of education. And so experiential learning, whether it's through VR, AR, or it is through other avenues of applied science in markets, doing it with the public, right, in order to build trust for the public that has to live with the decisions that get made by these autonomous or augmented systems is really key, right? So where should we be? We should be focusing on these applied areas for the markets that each country thinks are important for their future. If it's about manufacturing, then manufacturing. If it's about energy, energy is going to be across all of these things. It's a game changer, right? Manufacturing, mining, agriculture. Pick your spots, right? Do the applied research, build trust, understand what a reasonable failure looks like in this space. We all talk about success, but there's reasonable failures that can be developed and that you can learn from in this space. If you don't take the time to learn from them, then that failure, I believe, might cause a localized AI winter in certain markets because the catastrophic effect, people will back up from it. And we've already had too many false starts in bio. I don't think we can afford another one, as an example. And so applying this work in these key market areas, doing it in a way that actually builds trust, allowing government to actually develop more flexible policies that actually develop and enable at the speed of a market development, I think is key for us. and democracies actually working in common markets and sharing their results actually takes some of the inefficiency of the democratic system and speeds it up for everybody.
Sure, I'm going to ask you to come in the following way. China 15 years ago, and we were part of helping China to think about that from where I was at the time, had a tech strategy that said in 5 years we're going to get to here, 10 we're going to get to here, 15 we're going to get to here. And their objective was autonomy. They didn't want dependence on foreigners at that time for the core technology. We might benefit from the fact that this generation of AI is expected to consume, if they project it out, by 2030, so not far away, 14% of all energy made in America. And there's a report that says if you project that out to 2040, it's 28%. Now, a technology that consumes somewhere between 14 and 28% is not really a viable species. This is a dinosaur that's eating too much and is going to die. So not being first, not being second might not count, as long as you are third, though, with the right answer. Can India, do you think, forge the relationships with Europe in particular that has the technology and the science, and with others, Canadians, Australians, Japanese, but Europe has most, our benchmarking shows Europe is not far, the UK and the EU. Do you think we can do that in India?
Absolutely, Ketan, as the report points out, not only should India can do that, India should do that, because I think, India will need collaboration because it's running against time. Particularly in India's context, we need to do two things in parallel. We need to, in the short run, build those fundamental capacities for R&D, for learning for our coming generations, so that we are able to create these technologies and solutions internally. But that's a long-term project. I mean, that's a project that India should have started, like China, you said, 15 years ago, to have maintained its strategic autonomy today. But India is coming a little bit late to the game. And therefore, India is now doing the corrective measures to try and at least ensure that going into the future, we don't give away, we just don't produce as subcontractors for the rest of the world. We actually are doing fundamental research and fundamental work in our own country. But while we are doing that, we also can't ignore the fact that this race is happening real time. So we need to find strategic partners who will help us meet the coming wave from the United States and China. And in that, I think we have potential partners in the European Union and the UK who can be sort of complementary to what we can provide. These people have already some deep technologies, R&D, but they don't have very deep markets. And therefore, their collaboration with India becomes an obvious choice. They are equally concerned about what is happening with the United States and China coming to their markets. So this could be a coalition of the willing. In the medium to short term, it buys India time. It buys India's time to build its more fundamental defenses against this kind of an onslaught. So you're absolutely right that I think in the short run, India will have to look for partners like the EU and the UK, because, as I said, they bring in capital, they can bring in R&D, they can bring somewhat energy as well that we need, because in the short run, to produce this kind of thing we need, and India is an energy deficient country, we need to be able to ensure that we have energy supplies to be able to play this. So I think that India, among the sort of the whole host of 200 nations around the world, India's choices here right now in this are quite limited to some big players like the EU and the UK, because both America and China are definitely not going to collaborate with India on this.
Thank you, Shaurya. We're in the last 5 minutes. I'm just going to ask each of my colleagues here to say something, so that we've heard their final thoughts on this before I take one question from... Actually, why don't I take one question from the audience first? Anyone? Gentleman there, you were first, with the beard.
So this week there were two interesting statements. One was from Marco Rubio at Munich Security Conference, almost wishfully talking about the imperialistic time and so on. The second one was from Dario, Anthropic CEO, in which he explicitly talked about regime changes using AI. What are your reactions?
Glenn, would it be unfair to ask you that question? It would be. You relax. So our reaction is the following. If I have penetrated your mind and changed your beliefs, I can get you to revolt against your government. And so one of the most fundamental uses of AI is to shape your mind to do what you should do, right? So it is a basic tool, which in the old days would have been propaganda. It was just not very efficient. This is highly effective as a tool.
And it's accessible to anybody. Right, and so what was the purview of nation states relative to what was called influence operations is now an economy. It's an influence economy, right? I mean, think about it. We call them influencers, and they make a lot of money, right? And so now if you actually have a plan to put this into place and use that infrastructure to exert your will on a public, right? If you actually have the opportunity to control the data sets that are behind these pieces, you begin to rewrite history and control the data and influence the way people are processing it going forward. So that's my answer to that question.
It was unfair to ask him, but I'm glad he answered. There are so many hands up. I know we could go for another hour, but we're not allowed to because as the moderator, I have to make room for the next one. And I'm just going to say this, that you know, the most valuable thing in the world going forward, we know it's not oil, for sure, right? And we think it's data, but it's attention. If I capture your attention, right, I start to own your brain. And here's a scary part. If I capture your attention and I change your behavior, there's a genetic marker called an epigenetic. It captures that behavior, and you pass it to your kids. So don't lose sight of how profound the change is in the world and what it means for you and your kids. Without agency, you're not human anymore. And we're on that brink, civilizational brink. I'm going to ask each of my colleagues here, we're all part of the institute that is issuing this report to, or directors in that, to say one positive thing that we can do to make the world better. So I'm going to start with Glenn. Glenn, why don't you do it and just pass it along?
Oh, I don't have a positive one, sorry. My point here is on, I'm going to try to make it a positive, which is I believe that cognitive sovereignty is an inalienable right. And if it's not, then I don't know what an inalienable right really is. We have a choice. And I believe in the power of human agency and the power of partnership in order to come together as society, right, and rewrite the social contract, right, for what it means to actually move forward with these technologies to create the better geopolitical systems that provide what it says on the wall behind us: welfare for all, happiness for all.
Short, very positive. I don't have time to say how positive it is. I think India has an opportunity to set the model for the future of the future of education in the world. We need to double higher educational capacity in the world, and it's impossible to do that through the existing system that's there now. We can use AI as one of the tools to help us facilitate and dramatically improve the quality of education, access to education, and bring down the cost of education so that anybody in the country who wants to have a higher education can have world-class education in any language, in any subject. And not just world class. It will be interactive education, where you're not sitting, somebody lecturing a long time and reading a textbook. You have a doubt, you ask a question, and the system immediately comes back to you. It can be self-paced learning. So if you're tired one day, you don't miss the lecture, it tunes to what you've learned and what's the next thing, and you can go on. It's human-centered education. It's not to prepare us for a job. It's to help develop us as a human being. Our understanding, our attitudes, our capacity for interrelationships and all. I think it's a tremendous education, a tremendous opportunity, and India could be the leader for it and set the pace for the rest of the world.
Thank you. I think from India's context, the positive thing is that, India is a civilizational state. If in this game, data and information is the fuel, then we have the data and information and cognitive knowledge for the last 3,000 years. We have a huge advantage as we go into this game. Now it's our challenge how we convert that using technology into solutions that are not only true for India, but are actually going to be true for the rest of the world. And therefore, I think our rallying war cry of Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is, was India's approach to this, will actually find a chance for India to have the influence in this world where we will go with solutions and technology to the rest of the world.
I want to thank you for being a great audience. We're finished of time. And I'm going to give you one answer which actually protects you. And it is, as Shaurya said, inherent to this particular civilization, which is if you meditate, you get control back. No one can control somebody who has control over themselves. Thank you.
Sir, we need to take a picture, just a picture, right? Just for a second. Thank you for a wonderful session, sir. We are really at a crossroad, and you gave us a lot to think about. On behalf of India A team, I say thank you.
The report, sorry, I should have said,
everyone is
on
requested to please
S for
evacuate
sugar,
as the next section is
II.global.
going to start. Whoever has attended this session, the next session is going to start. Please leave the room. Let the other attendees join the session.